Welcome to Smart Cities and welcome to Melbourne during Grand Prix Month. We're here for the Cities 4 Summit, where Smart Tribes has recorded some of the keynote speeches and presentations. We hope you enjoy it. Join the tribe. Thank you.
Typically, a smart city is more efficient, enhances the quality of its residents' lives through faster internet connections, mobile phone, energy, transport. But with massive volumes of data being processed to bring about the smart city, there are significant issues in relation to the privacy and cyber security to consider. For instance, the amount of data being handled puts more individuals at risk of suffering serious harm resulting from a data breach concerning their personal information. So the solution is a concept which we're calling smart privacy. In our view, it's a term that deals with the fusion of two important privacy practices that we currently work with in corporate and government, and they are privacy by design and strong privacy governance frameworks. The first concept, privacy by design, is where the exact example of the Wellington situation. From the get-go, you build privacy in. You build it into the design and architecture of the systems, the business processes, and the network infrastructure. Privacy by design aims to ensure privacy is considered before and throughout the development and implementation of the initiatives. It was a phrase coined by the Ontario Privacy Commissioner some years ago. And it looks at making sure that you're thinking about privacy all the way through in terms of the collection and handling of data. It adopts an ethical framework of mind and employs data minimization, anonymization, and pseudonymization to ensure privacy is preserved. But it only goes so far because it is the design element. The other component that you need to have at the same time is a governance component. And as the possibility of data breach is also certain, as humans and machines together are not necessarily always reliable, you need to have a governance framework that's going to work to help protect the interests of the individuals. A strong privacy governance framework ensures that stakeholders are aware of their privacy obligations, they're also aware of the risks, and they're also aware of the opportunities. And so there's not a false sense of security about the safety of the information or a misunderstanding of how the information might be used. I think that meeting citizen privacy concerns is an essential part of smart privacy. Okay. I have quite a few slides, so I'll just flick through them quickly. So smart cities are continuing to rise, and according to a study carried out in the US, they're set to become the norm by 2025. American data storage company Seagate Technology reported that the rise can be attributed to the growing importance of data, which is critical to various aspects of human life. By 2025, he predicted that nearly a fifth of the data generated worldwide will be marked as critical to the daily life, and nearly a tenth as hypercritical. But what data is being collected in these cities, and how is it being used? Because that's a very important issue. There's a range and a variety of data that's collected, and it extends beyond the numbers and statistics observed in monitoring technologies. It includes data from governments and corporate surveys, data from social media, might be in city registers, birth, deaths, marriages, elections, households and employments. It might be used to monitor demographic patterns of citizens and to assess the quality of interactions. It underpins city management and planning, and it's used to enhance city services and support local citizens. All good stuff, all important stuff to drive the smart city. Data collected also can be used with an array of social media, and that's where accounts such as Facebook and Twitter are monitored to extract the analytics to understand the attitudes and the views of citizens, and the Facebook recent Facebook issues are relevant there. here is a table which came from a very fine article by Science Direct, which sets out a number of the different types of data that's collected in the course of running a smart city. And it's quite interesting, the different nature of it. And if you think of sort of the range of uses of this data to run the city, yes, that's great. But if you think to something more sinister as to how this might be manipulated or used in a way which was not expected by the people from whom the data was originally collected, then you can see that there are a plethora of issues that people should consider in this data and privacy space. So within these categories of data, they'll be collected both impersonal data, data that doesn't relate to individuals, and personal data, which is the type of information that's dealt with under the privacy legislation. The personal information is information, or the classic definition, information or an opinion about an identified individual, or an individual who's reasonably identified, whether it's an opinion, whether it's true, whether it's recorded in a material form or not. Some examples of this might be names, addresses, contact information, TFNs, and there's a subset of personal information which is sensitive information, and that's information that requires further protection and more permissions when you're collecting it. Racial, religious, political, health, that sort of information. Not financial information, interestingly enough. It's not sensitive in the sense under the legislation. The distinction between personal and sensitive data is important in terms of the privacy risks associated, but also just that body of personal information is the one that people are most concerned about. Interestingly, people will make a trade-off between the amount or sensitivity of data asked for and the benefits received in exchange. So in a smart city environment, let's use an example, that information is collected on your Opal card. So in a smart city environment, information is collected on your Opal card about the trips you take. Oh, sorry, I'm from New South Wales. What is it here? A Mighty card. About the trips that you take, the destinations, the amount of money. There's the information that exists on your card account anyway about who you are in the bank account. I think that what happens is that people are very happy to have the information of their transport transactions collected in order to give you capped benefits or time of day discounts or some of those sort of things. But I think that people are very uncomfortable if they thought that the information around who they were, where they lived, and their transport movements was matched and used or sold in order to benefit the Opal people or the Mighty people. So the interesting dilemma is that if you ask for information from people, they will give it to you if they believe they'll get a trade-off like the transport situation, but they won't want that information to be more freely available or used for other purposes. So coming back to the capture of data in smart cities, efficiencies are driven by the capture of data, and the efficiencies could be eliminating redundancies, finding ways to save money, streamlining workers' responsibilities, and the services can improve. So as I said, the Opal cards or the Mighty card, you'll get a range of cost reductions to the city because the fares are administered in a way which removes a number of people. The payment system is more efficient. You have a very streamlined, I was watching this morning on the train, a very streamlined movement of people through turnstiles, both in and out. So you've got a benefit for the citizens for the efficiency and a benefit for the city for the efficiencies. So that was that. Environmental, the other data that's collected. The interesting privacy dilemma arises where benefits of the smart cities arise from data that's publicly accessible and of an impersonal nature. People are willing to share that data. So if it's your trips to and fro on the train system, usually people are not uncomfortable about sharing that data. But if it concerns their particular personal information or sensitive issues that relate to them, they're less easily accepted. So personal data that's collected and monitored for surveillance purposes disturbs people much more than personal data that's collected for providing services. So if you looked at the public transport situation, where the personal data is for providing a more efficient public service, quicker trains, sort of less administration, people are happy about the collection of information. But if you've got a CCTV footage situation where there's a great deal of information that's being collected about individuals from the CCTV footage, people are much more uncomfortable about that collection. Although there's the argument that the CCTV footage allows cities to become more efficient, whether it be monitoring transport congestion or it might be monitoring crime. Nevertheless, there's been some surveys showing that on that continuum between services and surveillance, people are comfortable with collection of personal information to give them better services, uncomfortable when it leads into a surveillance environment. So the challenge is ensuring that if you are collecting information that is personal information or that is regarded by people as personal to them, that you ensure that you're collecting it, obviously in accordance with the law, but that when you're collecting it in that field which deals with the surveillance of individuals that can identify the individuals, that you do it in a way which encourages the individuals to trust the system. A serious risk in the collection of data within the smart city environment is the risk of data breach. And that might be inadvertent data breach or a hacker type of data breach. And the more valuable the amount of data that's been collected, the more attractive that data becomes to people who might be interested in exploiting it or hacking it. Or the more extensive it becomes, the higher the risk of data breach. So the concern about data breaches is that there could be potential disruption of the smart city operations or harm to the residents. So that the privacy considerations around the protection of the information become very important. If we look at the concept of privacy by design as one of the elements of a smart privacy framework, we see that as being an opportunity for smart cities to adopt the practice, the Wellington is examples of one, the practice of assessing the privacy risks and the data collection risks at the time at which you are putting together a project, or to the extent that the project is well advanced, bringing that forward to become one of the issues that are considered, rather than waiting till a complaint might be received or somebody looks at it at the last minute. Usually, it seems that many initiatives in the smart city space have been developed with little consideration of privacy and security harms, and that usually the privacy and security issues are tacked on as an afterthought without a strategic oversight involved. The point of privacy by design is to ensure that privacy is considered at the outset and throughout the development. The challenge is that within the smart city environment, to ensure that data is collected and not used for a purpose that isn't the core purpose of collection, governments need, or councils or whoever it is that's running the project, needs to impose an ethical framework that looks at the way in which the data is collected and the purposes for which it's collected. One of the core considerations should be the privacy of the citizens when you're capturing the data. And there are a number of ways in which you can both capture the data, but at the same time minimise any risk to citizens from the misuse of the data or by collecting too much information. There are a range of data practices that you can adopt. Things like data minimisation, which is a methodology that states that processing and storage of data is limited to the purchase for which it was collected. So in the Opal example, if you're looking to collect information about people's transport habits, you only collect my information about my transport habits for the limited time when you need to charge my bill or allow me to check my bill or give me the discounts that my price from the transport I took in that month. Thereafter, the information needs to be de-identified so that it doesn't relate to me. And so you don't have this deep body of information that talks about the way in which I've used public transport, the times, the places, the sorts of public transport over a particular period. So that the data minimisation theory is one which says, yes, collect it, but only collect what you need, only keep it for as long as you need. And then, if you still need it for other purposes, neutralise it so that it doesn't create problems for you. Use it for demographic purposes, for efficiency purposes, for all those other things that you can use that information, but make sure that the individual is not involved in that and can't be traced. This would be a reasonable community expectation, and I think that's something that people need to be working with. There is a case study which involved Mr. Nigel Waters, who is a privacy advocate of many years standing. He launched a legal challenge against the collection of his information by Transport New South Wales. Because he was a senior, he had different information that was collected about him. And he objected to that and objected to the reasons that it was collected and kept. Eventually he won. It took him 2 years. But I think that it's a really good example that there are people who are concerned about these things, and when they're aware, they will pursue them. The other ways in which you can retain and benefit from the collection of information which helps drive the smart cities are the range of data manipulation techniques. There's anonymization, which is basically irreversibly de-identifying. There's pseudonymization, I can't say that word, I'm sorry. There's creating pseudonyms. You can't attribute it to the individuals, but it is still, without the use of information, it's not quite as protective for the individuals. There's de-identification, where you remove personal identifiers, like say with the Opal information, who I am, where I live. You leave my transport history, and then you put something else in or you take something out, so there's no way in the world it can be connected to me. And destruction of data when it's no longer needed. Ironically, a lot of problems arise where people keep data for longer than they need. I won't go into the Red Cross data breach, but it was the biggest data breach, personal information data breach that occurred in 2016, where information about individuals who had put up their hand to give blood was made available publicly on the internet. The contractor didn't manage the website correctly. And basically the relevant conclusion for this point here was that Red Cross and the contractor had kept more information than they needed to keep about these individuals. They hadn't carefully managed the information collection process, and so they found themselves, when the breach happened, in a very serious situation. The other aspect of it, besides the design aspect, where you make sure that you've designed in the steps and the checks and balances to protect people's information is the ongoing governance issues. Many of you will have data governance frameworks that you work within. This is positing that similar frameworks be instituted in relation to the whole of the smart city concept. It's a framework for strategic governance. It helps with the regulation and oversight, and it protects individuals and the organisations that are running the cities. Consistent, transparent policies about the way information is collected and used are essential. One such policy is a data security breach response plan, which people might be familiar with, because it became compulsory to have such a plan on the 22nd of February this year through the privacy legislation. So if we're talking in terms of the city and in terms of the organisations that work through into the smart city, each of those will need those sort of plans. And the data security breach response plan is not just for personal, can be for other information as well as not just personal. But basically, it's important as part of your toolkit to have these governance systems in place. You need effective incident response plans, which are when data breach plan will have contain and remediate or risk assessment, notification if you have to notify under the privacy rules, post-breach assessment. So those sort of things are needed in order to ensure that you've got a good governance framework for privacy in a smart city or for data protection in a smart city. Harking back to the concept of privacy by design, we know that these sort of cities and these sort of programs, like any organisation, evolves. So you're designed to smart city, but things change, things evolve, things build. So if you design to privacy in back here, what do you do when things change? Well, within the Privacy Act framework, there's a concept of a privacy impact assessment. It was actually in the Commission's framework. And that's the sort of thing that, in our view, should form part of any governance framework. So that when you have new components, new projects, new initiatives, the privacy issues or the data collection issues are considered at the same time. It's a systematic looking at the project with a privacy lens or a data collection lens. And if you're thinking, yes, the personal information collection and the way it's used is important for creating public trust, which is important for ensuring that these initiatives are adopted and successful, then this will be obviously something that you need to do. Big change of mindset though. I mean, I do this with lots of my clients, small, big, they all go, why do I need to consider privacy when I've looked at, I can do this financially, I've got the money, I've got the needs, I've got the marketing plan, whatever, what's this privacy thing? And it's an educational exercise and a mindset introduction that you need to show that the impact of the privacy, the privacy effects of the initiatives should be considered as right from the get-go. Okay. The other thing I think is important, and it's something that I think most organisations haven't really embraced yet. We're seeing a lot of it coming about because of the radical changes that are happening in the privacy environment in Europe, which is the introduction of a new regime called the General Data Protection Regulation. All smart environments have a chain. You'll have your government, you'll have your service providers, you'll have your councils, you'll have other service providers, all in a chain. And if data is the juice that runs this, people will be exchanging data up and down that chain. What you need to be looking at is to be ensuring that everybody is behaving in the same way in the chain as relates to the data. Because a failing down here will cause a disaster up here. That was the Red Cross problem. A failing in their service provider caused a disaster for Red Cross. So that the other part of the governance is not just the frameworks, but it's ensuring that your partners, your stakeholders, etc., are all involved in that same chain of governance. So, quick takeaways, individuals and privacy need to be one of the considerations where you're doing smart city project design. The benefits of the project need to be articulated because the privacy benefit trade-off allows people to become more comfortable and to give you more access to information. The public trust by proper data governance is a really important issue. Recent disaster with Woolworths was an example of people who complied with their privacy statements were held up to the media and absolutely pilloried, even though they'd done everything in accordance to what they said, because the gap between expectation and reality in the eyes of the individuals was wide. Only collect the data you absolutely need, and only keep the data you absolutely need. Get rid of it when you don't need it any longer, and be prepared for a breach. Governance and planning are the two things that are important in privacy where it relates to the smart city environment. Thank you very much.